Alrighty, welcome back everyone. Scarlane here, bringing you a new Neverwinter video. In today's agenda, we are diving into the Warlock build-in guide for AoE and single target post-combat rework changes. So this is like a pre-mod 20 guide, although I'll probably list it as a mod 20 guide. There are going to be adjustments and changes coming down the road shortly within a few months, so I'll probably put updated builds out as well. But as it sits right now, I wanted to get the information out there for everyone playing a Warlock that can at least go in the right direction for right now until new gear comes out and we progress through the game. So we are doing things a little differently here today. On your screen, we're going to be using Rainer's character builder. It's easier to use the character builder than me navigate through the menus on console and show you guys everything. So make sure you leave me feedback below if you like it this way, or I can always go back to the old way. Shout out to Rainer. It's a very useful tool. Everybody should be using it. It's free to use and download. Head over to Rainer's channel and you'll be able to find it. It's also in his Discord. So again, huge shout out to Rainer, big part of the community. It's a valuable tool that everyone should be utilizing. So full disclaimer again, this is a template of what you should be doing. This is what I have found thus far to lead to the most DPS, whether it be on AoE or single target. However, as more gear comes out, things will change, as mentioned. Some of these items you may not have, but this is what you're going to want to strive to get for. And just also make, a note that if any slight changes in this build is going to affect your overall statistics. If you follow this Warlock guide, you're pretty much going to have to follow it the whole way through to get the statistics that you're going to see. My thresholds are very low. I'm only over-capped by a certain amount. That way everything is capped and everything is sitting pretty. So for instance, if you don't have one of the items and you have to substitute another item in, you're going to have to mess with your statistics. You're not going to get the same results that I'm about to show you. So just keep that in mind. As always, that's the full disclaimer. Hopefully you enjoy this, and without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in here. So we are going to start with the race, and you do have some leeway here. You can either go Sun Elf for the 5% action point gain, which I would encourage, as our action point gain is very good right now. You'll be able to use your dailies, and dailies are giving a lot of damage, obviously. However, you can go with the Tefling as well. So if you remember the Tefling, once a mob or a boss goes beneath 50% of its HP, then you do an extra 5% damage. In the long run, I think Sun Elf is most likely going to lead to more DPS because you're always going to have that 5% AP gain, whereas the 5% bonus damage is only when the boss gets, negative 50% HP. That's just my opinion. You can play whatever race you desire. So let's open the race tab here. Again, we did pick Sun Elf. You're going to go into Intelligence and Charisma for your attributes, and then you're also going to go Intelligent Charisma on the bottom through the attributes the whole way through. Let's jump right into the gear. So again, if you have to substitute pieces of gear, then that's your own doing. You'll have to farm what you see on the screen and go from there. If you don't have items, I'll do my best to make in substitutions for you. However, your statistics are not going to look exactly like this, unfortunately. So starting off with the headpiece, we are using the Garisto horns, the blessed version. This comes from a tier 1 hunt in Avernus. Pretty easy to farm, to be honest. This gives us 10% power when we're in combat, as long as we're doing damage. The enchantments, we are using all darks in our utility slots, and that's for our Forte. Forte is a very important stat. I'll bring it up right now. So if we look at the Forte stat, for Hellbringer Warlock, we gain power, critical strike, and awareness. 3 very important statistics. So Forte is very important. We are using armor kits power on all of the ones on the left side. in our overload, I'm not going to go in depth on overloads, but I have demonic empowerment here. This is for extra AP gain, so that's why my AP gain is probably higher than most people. However, I don't use these all the time, right? These are very limited time overload slots. You don't want to waste these. This is something you only want to use in maybe the new dungeon, Vault of Stars, or if you're doing Zariel, or maybe even Tom, Tower of the Mad Mage, if you want to waste your combat time. These only have a 10-hour limit, so don't rely on that. Next up for the armor piece, we are using the Bone Devil's Ribcage, and again, this is one of those items that it may be harder to obtain for some players. This, again, comes from the Tier 3 Hunt in Avernus, very, sought after, and this gives us critical strike and critical severity on procs, which is why this is so important. As far as our enchantments go here, again, defensive slots, we're using demonics, all demonics, and all gigantics in offensive slots, and then darks in all your utility slots. Power reinforcement kits. Now, Shadowclad I want to talk about very briefly. I have notes down here for the Shadowclad. So when you fully proc a Shadowclad, you're going to ultimately get 64% deflection and 32% defense when it's fully procced. You get 8 stacks. Every time you get hit, you get a stack, and this is the numbers that it adds up to. Now, ultimately, that's going to give me 96% deflection and 72% defense. If you obviously add 64 and 41, you could do the math, right? Or deflection. I'm sorry, deflection is 32 and then 64, so it's 96%. Now, the problem with the Shadowclad is that if you would happen to deflect an attack, then all of those stacks reset. So it comes down to personal preference with the armor enchantment. The negation is probably one of the best ones out there right now. Negation on a DPS, if you're doing a dungeon, will help your survivability a lot. You'll feel a little more tankier than you would. The Shadowclad is a good enchantment, but the negation is probably going to be the go-to for most DPS. And of course, that's only in dungeons. Now, in a boss fight, or if you're doing Tower of the Mad Mage, or you're doing Zariel, you're probably going to want to stick with that Bark Shield. The Bark Shield isn't as good as what it used to be. However, in the trials like Zariel and Tower of the Mad Mage, you should have 1 or 2 healers that are pretty much just healing everyone anyway. In a dungeon, on a DPS, you might get away from the tank. The healer might be out of range. There are certain circumstances that will put you in harm's way. So the negation and the Shadowclad ultimately will give you more survivability. Now, here's another piece that we have to go in depth about. Now, I'm using the Tempter of Twilight gloves. This is the mod 17 glove set. This is the one that came with Starduck. And this is the encounter powers do 3% more damage, and that's huge for this build. This build overall is fully optimized for DPS. This is the most damage that you're going to do on AoE and single target when we get to single target. But these gloves are very important because this is the encounter power does 3% more damage. Now again, this is the mod 17 gloves. These are not very easy to obtain. You have to get them out of the Zoc boxes, or by turning in your Master Expedition quest, or the Warden Expeditions, or the Fragmented Expeditions. So yeah, if you don't have these, guess what, guys? You're going to go back to Mod 16 and Mod 17 and start farming Expeditions again. Hopefully some of you kept these, or maybe you were never lucky enough to ever get a pair of these to begin with. What's funny is that I recently just got these by luck. So yay for me. So get ready to farm. Again, utility slot is going to be dark, and then the overload is where I have my Rage of Flames, which is 5% more DPS. Again, overloads, we're not going in depth. Armor reinforcements, power. So very briefly, we're going to look at alternatives. So the first alternatives is the Spiked Defender Vambracers, which are 1,000 times easier to get than the Tempter. Just be aware that your DPS is going to go down. I personally don't like this effect and how you have to maintain this effect, but if this is your only option, then so be it. Now there are 2 other options, is that you can go all the way back and actually get the older versions of these Tempter gloves. And there are two versions. The first version is going to be the Terrored Grips, and you're going to notice the item level difference. The Terrored Grips are item level 756 compared to the 1000 on these, which means lower statistics. However, you're still gaining that encounter powers deal 3% more damage. This is the most important. The equip bonus is the most important. The stats are irrelevant. If you happen to have to use these Terrored Grips, then you'll just have to adjust your statistics as you see fit. The Terrored Grips, of course, are coming from mod 14, which is Barovia, and they come from the Hunt's Kuska. So you will have to go and farm Kuska posters until the Terrored Grips do drop for you. Now, if you can't, for whatever reason, get Terrored Grips, there is one more alternative, and that's going back even further, and that's going to be the Jaw Ripper gloves. Again, item level significantly goes down. Now you're looking at 672 compared to the 1000 or the 756, whatever this was. Yeah, 756. But again, Jaw Ripper gloves, even easier to get than the Terrored Grips. The Jaw Ripper gloves, again, have the encounter power 3%, and it comes from the Tyrant. However, the Tyrant also has a 100% drop rate. If you are able to get a Tyrant lore, these gloves are going to drop. They have a 100% drop rate. This is going all the way back to Omu in mod 13. So that's my little spiel about the gloves. Obviously, you want to get the best that you can. So be farming your Master Expeditions every day, and hopefully you get RNG on your side and you might be able to pull one of these gloves. If not, you're going to have to go with one of the alternatives. Let's talk about the weapons. For AoE, I'm specifically using the Redeemed Citadel set, which is the Blessed set. So we have the Blessed Blade here, and I'm using that for the effect. Every 30 seconds you get 3% power, accuracy, and combat advantage, and then you also get Blessed. So you're either going to gain 5% critical strike or 7.5% action point gain, and that's why I run these weapons, specifically on AoE, is it's all about that action point gain. The faster your action point gain is, the faster you can use Tyrannical Curse on trash mobs and just destroy everything. If we look at the enchantments here, again, Gigantics in all my offensive slots, and then for AoE, undoubtedly you're still going to be using a Lightning on AoE. The offhand to go with it, we are going to have Gigantic and Demonic, and then the class feature is AP gain, and then the artifact modification. I have accuracy, but again, as I have in the notes here, accuracy is a dump stat. You only really need 55% to 60% accuracy, but there's just nothing else to put here. I mean, if you need to put something else here, for instance, if you have to use something other than these gloves and you're missing statistics, then by all means, this is one of the places that you can make it up. I just have accuracy here because, you know, there's nothing else I can put here. The only other thing I could put here is HP. For the feet, we are still using the Rusted Iron Leggings for the 5% damage. And yes, it still does have negative incoming healing. My incoming healing is only 8.5%. However, it shouldn't be a problem, to be honest. If you have a adequate healer, you shouldn't have a problem. So you can get that 5% extra damage. Now, again, there are replacements here. If you so choose, and it's all personal preference. This is just what I'm using. Again, we have Dark in the utility and then Power reinforcements. Let's look at our right side here. Let's start with the 3-piece set. We are using Lost Mouth. Yes, I know a lot of people in the community have been, you know, there's been whispers and blah, 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 and everyone has their own personal opinion on everything. But I'm here to tell you that the Lost Mouth set is most likely going to be best in slot on the Warlock in an AoE situation. And the whole reason is because it double procs, essentially. So we already know that if you're running the Envenom set, which you can clearly see I am here in Artifacts, I have 3 journals, right? We have the Frozen Journal, we have the Flayed Journal, and then the Envenomed is my active artifact. The 3-piece journal set has the Lost Mouth bonus on it. However, if you actually run the old school Lost Mouth bonus, it essentially double procs. So every time you critical strike, you're going to do additional damage times 2. An example is when I every time I critical strike in game right now, my Lost Mouth set usually procs for about 4,000 damage. So then you times that by 2 essentially. So instead of just procking once, it procs twice. And it usually fluctuates anywhere from 3,500 to 5k. So is it overwhelmingly broken? No, not in my opinion, but it's just the mechanics currently of the game, and we need to utilize that to the best we can. In an AoE situation, there's no other 3-piece artifact set that's really worthwhile. If you're running Infernal Citadel, then you can run the Dark Remnant set, and you're just going to have 5% uptime on, or 5% damage with 100% uptime, right? However, if you're running the Hallister set, you have to stand still for 3 seconds to gain 5% damage. So instead of having that 5% damage, depending on the circumstances, you could just run the Lost Mouth set, especially if you're running old content. If you're running daily random queues and you get thrown into a Castle Never, or whatever the case may be, you know, you get thrown into a Demogorgon, you get thrown into a Swervenborg, it doesn't matter. I would prefer the extra raw damage over the percentile damage. Currently, as it sits in game, again, when more artifact 3-piece sets come out, we'll probably navigate away from Lost Mouth. But as it currently sits right now, this is most likely the ideal setup that you're going to want to run. So again, that is the Lost Mouth artifact, the Lost Mouth necklace, and the Lost Mouth belt. So if we look at this, of course, we have Darks and Gigantics. On the right side, we're using all combat advantage. So that's combat advantage the whole way down on armor kits, Darks and utilities, and Demonics and defense. As far as your rings, we are going back to the old ways of double stacking the Tower of Mad Mage rings. So for the Warlock, this is the accuracy ring, and the whole reason behind this is because the range powers 3%. Now this stacks, of course, so your range powers actually are doing 6% more damage. So yes, we are going back to the original days and using 2 Tower of the Mad Mage rings. Again, offensive slots, all Gigantics, combat advantage on the right side. Finally, we come down to the shirt and pants. For me, shirt and pants, kind of irrelevant. However, I'm using the tier 3 piece. Most people probably are not going to have this, so you might want to still go with like an ebony stained or even some of the Infernal Forged sets. Whatever you have to put here. But for me personally, I need this, and this build overall needs this for the effect of the 5,000 power, and that's how I power cap. So that's, again, if you don't have this, you're going to have to make up that power from somewhere else. And then, of course, you want to use one Tenebrous somewhere. I always put mine on my shirt. And then the pants of the Hell's Interrogator, this doesn't matter. You can put the awareness pants here, you can put defense pants here. It doesn't matter what pants you have, to be completely honest. Again, the active artifact, we are still using the Envenom Storyteller Journal. It's too good not to use. There's so many effects on the journals, it's just too good not to use. So that wraps it up for the gear. If you have any questions about the gear, feel free to leave a comment below. We're going to move right into the boons. All of the power, all of the HP, critical strike, critical severity, defense, awareness, accuracy. You have to subtract 2 off of here. There's 2 boon points in mod 20. So once you get the 2 new boon points, then you can put those in there. Masterclass, 4 out of 4. You need the Forte. Forte is too important of a stat not to use. And then Call of Power for the action point gain. Finally, we have Deathly Rage as the top. Chance on a kill to do the following for 10 seconds. It adds 2% combat advantage, power, and crit severity. Do you need this? No. You should be stat capped without this. However, I view this as a little bit of buffer, because to reach our stat caps on everything, we are relying on proccing companions and proccing specific gear pieces. So for everything to be aligned perfectly, for you to get 90% on all the stats that you need to, yeah, it's not very easy. So just taking this as a buffer to get that 2% extra on those specific statistics, it doesn't really hurt. However, if you don't want that, you could go into Bloodlust, which is decrease target's defense by 1% per rank, so it's 3% defense debuff. And then you do an extra attack equal to 120% of damage plus 10% rank. So this is 150% of your damage. And then finally, it also increases your AP gain by 1.5%. So typically, I use Bloodlust on my single target, and I use Deathly Rage on AoE. However, you can use Bloodlust on both AoE and single target. You'll notice the difference when I show you guys single target. But yeah, it's either or, preference, completely up to you. As far as the stronghold boons, I go with accuracy just because I don't need the crit severity or the critical strike. The defense, this is completely up to you. I spec into awareness. HP got a significant reduction, so I don't think it's really worth it anymore. You can see I'm at 608,000. If we put that on, it goes to 622. That little bit of HP doesn't matter. I rather have the awareness. My unbuffed awareness is 55%, and it goes up to 58%. That's like 3%. That's a big deal. Same thing with defense. My defense is at 41. Bickety bam, goes to 44. So that's personal preference again, whether you want to run the defense or the awareness. I would honestly stay away from the HP. I don't think it's really worth it anymore. And then, of course, utility slot is just mount speed or whatever. It doesn't really matter what you pick. All right, let's get into the mounts. So these are all mythic, right? So we have 10 mythic, we have 100% bolster. These are all mythic in my stable, and this is what I'm currently using. So Commander T-Rex for Assassin's Covenant, King of Spines, Assassin's Covenant, Tenzer's Disc, Assassin's Covenant. Yes, Assassin's Covenant times 3. That's a big deal. We need them for the stats. Just do it. Beholder Personal Tank is for Gladiator's Gal, just for the movement speed, and the Black Ice Warhorse is Artificer's Persuasion. However, you don't have to use Artificer's Persuasion. The problem is, and I've said it in many of the past guides, is that the Mount Insignia bonus needs a complete overhaul. We need new bonuses. We need better bonuses. I mean, they need to overhaul the whole Insignia bonus system. Now, if we look at insignias, this is a good place to stat balance if you so choose. If you're following this guide to, a T, then you're going to be good. You just want to follow this. You essentially want as many dominances as you can get. So for me, for instance, I'm using a dominance, brutality, brutality. And then we're using a dominance, brutality, and skill. And then we're using a skill, dominance, dominance. And then a skill, dominance, and then dominance, dominance, dominance. So you can go back and pause the video if you need to see that, but essentially I'm using all dominance and skill, except I'm using 3 brutality, right? Yeah, 2 brutality here and 1 brutality here. Everything else is dominance and skill. As far as your combat power for AoE, I have gone back to Crystal Eruption. However, there's a plethora of choices. I mean, you can use what you want. However, for an AoE situation, I want to do the damage. Crystal Eruption is an AoE of 1,000. I was using Arcane Maelstrom. It was good. I still like it, don't get me wrong. You can use the Legendary Carpet of Flying. I mean, you can use whatever you essentially want. For the equip power, I have Precision, and I need this for this specific build. I need the critical strike and crit severity, and this is one that most people aren't going to have. You're going to have to level this up. Even myself, I had to level this up. Precision, it only comes from the Heavy Warg, the Hell Warg, and the Medium Warg. Okay? There's only 3 mounts in the game that have Precision. The Heavy Warg usually comes at Epic, so you just have to take that to Legendary and Mythic. The Hell Warg is blue, and I believe the Medium Warg is blue, so you would have to level those even further. Again, this is necessary for this build to hit all my statistical caps. So if you're following this and you're following everything, then most likely you're going to need that precision there. As far as the mount colors go, you're going to notice I'm not using all of them, and there's a reason. I have the encounter power one at Legendary, I have the movement speed one at Epic, and I have the AP gain at Epic. We're not using all the colors. I have a note here, somewhere, right here. Your item level needs to be around 51,000, guys. Everything gets scaled in the game right now. the Vault of Stars Mod 20 dungeon is going to scale your character down to 51,000. So if you're running around right now and your item level is 53,000, 54,000, 55,000, all you're doing is giving yourself a bigger headache than you need to. Because even in the latest and newest content, Vault of Stars, you're going to get scaled down to 51k. So if you're sitting there as a 55,000 item level character and you're wondering why you can't maximize your stats and hit your statistical hard caps, it's because you're trying too hard and you don't need those stats. They don't need to be that high. Even the newest content coming in Mod 20, you only need to be 51,000. Now, I'm less than that on my AoE. On my single target, I'm right on the mark, right? I'm like 51.8 or something. But for AoE, it's irrelevant. But yeah, there's a lot of people struggling right now to hit the statistical hard caps, and they don't know why, and it's because they're like 4,000 item level higher than they need to be. Now, as the game progresses and Mod 21 comes out, Mod 22, then yes, your item level is going to be higher. But for instance, these people that are running around with like all mythic collars, yeah, it looks pretty and it boosts your damage, but you're not going to get that damage in the dungeon because you're going to get scaled down to 51k. I could put on any collar here. I can put on a rank 3 epic. My damage clearly goes up. My item level went up. That means my damage goes up. But you're not going to see that in the dungeon. So for instance, if I put a mythic collar on here, you know, my damage is going to go up. If I put another mythic collar on here, now my damage is up to 6,300 because I'm 5,200 item level. But you have to realize that it's not going to be beneficial to you, okay? You need to get around 51,000 item level for current content. Anything after that, all you're doing is giving yourself a bigger headache because it's going to be harder for you to hit those statistical hard caps because your item level is so high. And in reality, it doesn't need to be that high because you're going to be scaled down to 51k anyway. So that's the mounts. Moving on. Companions. Here we go. I am using a Wattler. Okay? And there's a reason for that as well. You need to have 10 mythic companions, so make sure you get your companions leveled up. I'm using a Wattler, which is an augment. So if we look at these very quickly and we select augments, the Wattler is giving me a bonus to combat advantage is what I need. Okay? This build suffers from combat advantage. You need combat advantage. So combat advantage, awareness, and defense. I'm taking those 2 defensive stats over everything else because my stats are hard capped. So a lot of people are using the Owlbear Cub, for instance, because it's accuracy, combat advantage, and crit severity. However, I don't need that. Accuracy is a dump stat. I told you guys before, you only need 55% to 60% accuracy. I mean, if you're at 61, 62, 65, it doesn't matter. Accuracy is the least important stat. For whatever reason, it is. It's nothing more than a dump stat. So, accuracy, combat advantage, and crit severity. However, with this build, with this setup, with this guide, you do not need this crit severity. You're going to be capped on crit severity. So, for me, I decided to go with the Wattler. And that's because it does give me the combat advantage, and it's giving me defensive statistics. So, awareness and defense. It's not a lot, but it's better than, you know, using the Owlbear Cub and wasting stats. So that's where I'm at on that. As far as your gear slots, the gold-leafed Grimoire is going to be the Mod 16 single-statted combat advantage one. And then we are using 2 blessed Grimoires, which are both critical strike, and these are the ones that come from Redeem Citadel. You have to farm favor and buy the companion packs, and you're going to need 2 of the crit ones. 2 critical strike ones, and 1 Mod 16 combat advantage. The reason we're using the Mod 16 combat advantage one here and not the Mod 19 combat advantage, because for whatever reason, the Blessed Grimoire for the Mod 19, it has an offensive and a defensive slot, and I don't know why. So as far as your runestones, I'm using all combat advantage, so Ignatic times 6. Now, here's the juicy stuff, and this is where we get most of our combat advantage from this build. Right off the bat, you need acute senses. That's 7.5 combat advantage right off the bat. In our offensive slot, we're using the Wild Hunt Rider. It procs fairly often, but you are relying on that proc. It gives you 11.2% combat advantage when it procs. In our defensive slot, we're using a Fire Archon, and this is going to be 7.5% combat advantage when it procs. You see the trend here. This is all combat advantage, guys. Everything on this page, on your companion page, is combat advantage. The runestones times 6 is combat advantage. All of the percent is combat advantage. So, 7.5% here, 11.2% here, 7.5% here. In the utility slot, I'm using the Alchemist, and that is going to be, again, 3.7% combat advantage and 3.7 critical strike. We're going to skip this one. And then finally, in the Universal, we're using Stalldorf, and again, 7.5 combat advantage. Now this slot, this is what I choose to use, but this slot, this is up to you. You need something with combat advantage, okay? So I chose the Intellectual Devourer, which is awareness and combat advantage. I like boosting my awareness because I don't like getting hit in a dungeon by combat advantage, right? I don't like it. As a DPS, I don't like it. So this is the Intellectual Devourer, and it's awareness and combat advantage. However, you can pick something else. It's personal preference. There aren't very many options, however, okay? I know a lot of people right now are using Book Imps or the Fey Panther. And if you look on the auction house and see the prices of these, you are not going to use these unless you already have them, and I don't think you honestly need them. The Book Imp Presence and the Fey Panther are both accuracy and combat advantage. Accuracy is the least important stat in the game. You just do not need it. You only need 55% to about 60%. Okay? So if you're going to pay 10 million for a Book Imp, or you're going to pay 20 million for a Fey Panther, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I went with the Intellectual Devourer for the awareness and combat advantage. However, there are some other options here as well. You can go with the Zentorium Warlock, which is going to give you combat advantage and HP. So a little bit of HP isn't horrible. It's 15k, not something outrageous. But you need to have something with combat advantage on it, right? There's a few in here with like defense as well. Yeah, here it is. The Man-at-Arms is combat advantage and defense. So if you didn't want to boost your awareness and you wanted to go defense, you could put the Man-of-Arms in there and try to boost your defense a little bit. It's just personal preference. This slot is 100% personal preference. However, you do have to have something with combat advantage there to meet the thresholds. And that's just, again, that's up to you. If you want to spend that kind of money on accuracy, by all means. I can't tell you how to spend your money. Do you need it? No, you don't. You don't need it. So take that with a grain of salt. Again, Intellectual Devourer, pretty cheap for the most part. Prices are probably going to skyrocket now. Sorry. It is what it is. Awareness, combat advantage. Biggity bam. Right? So that's companions, guys. Any questions? Leave a comment below. Let's move on to the feats very quickly. Nothing has changed. The build itself, nothing has changed. For AoE, we're using Double Scorch, Warlock's Curse, Risky Investment, Creeping Death, and Soul Spark Recovery. Same thing as the powers. Literally nothing has changed in the build itself. At wills, we're using Eldritch Blast, Hand of Blight Melee, Fiery Bolt, Blades of Vanquished, Hellfire Ring, Tyrannical Curse, Soul Siphon, Dark Prayers, No Pity, No Mercy. Literally nothing has changed on the build itself. Now, you're asking yourself, well, Gar, your statistics look like shit, nothing's capped, right? Well, we're not buffed. This is completely unbuffed. This is standing around. Now, let's go over buffs. First and foremost, campfire buff, of course. You're always going to have a campfire buff. You're going to run and touch a campfire. The campfire buff lasts 15 minutes unless you die, and even if you do die and you don't revive, then you're going to lose the buff. But if you revive and go back to a campfire, you should always have a campfire buff up. Evocation's Blessing, this doesn't matter. It's going to be random. I always try to get awareness out of this. because I just have, thousands of invocation blessings laying around. I just spam them until I get awareness, right? So we'll put awareness on. Stronghold food, this is personal preference. I go with chocolate because, again, it's awareness. However, if you want to boost your movement speed or your, I know there's a defense run, right? Critical strike, power, defense. So if you want the defense, you could go with the bread here. But that, again, it's personal preference. I just go with chocolate. More awareness. Biggity bam. So now my awareness is 61.5. Now, here's the expensive part, right? And this has been a thing. You have to rely on potions right now. So the elixirs, we're still using Wildstorm Elixir. For the potions, we're still using Superior Flack of Potency. And then finally, the big boy right here, Watermelon Sorbet. Have you guys seen the prices of Watermelon Sorbet? Yes, that's right. They skyrocketed. And there's a reason. Watermelon Sorbet. So now we're fully buffed, right? We're fully buffed, but you're saying, well, Gar, your stats look like shit. Nothing's capped out. That's right, because that's just with buffs on, guys. Now we have to proc all this gear as well as companions and everything else, right? So now if we come down here, we go in combat, there you go. The only thing that is not going to show is the combat advantage, and of course I have a note here. My combat advantage does go to 90% with the Wild Hunt Rider and the Fire Archon, but they both have to proc at the same time. That's why I personally don't like relying on buffs and or item procs to maintain my statistics, because it's going to be very hard for you as a player to maintain all of that at once, to hit all these statistical hard caps at the same time. It's not going to happen very often. You are very rarely going to have 90% combat advantage, critical strike, and crit severity. All three of these, you're very rarely going to have 90% of those all at once. Now, yeah, you're going to hit combat advantage 90%, maybe crit severity 9%, but your crit only goes to 87% because something didn't proc, right? It's not the end of the world, but it is what it is, and that's where the current game is right now. The only thing is your power. Your power is always going to be 90% because of the sorbet and everything else. So that right there on your screen, folks, is the full AoE loadout, build, etc. Maxed out statistics are right here if you want to look at them. The awareness does actually go to 65%. We are going back and using the Schult item. The Empowered Chain of Scales gives 3% more awareness. So my awareness actually goes to 65%. We're not using the Reforger box. The Reforger box gives power. We don't need power. So we're going back to old items. 65% awareness is better than wasting 3% on power that you don't need because you're already overcapped. And then again, my other defensive statistics, again, with the Shadowclad, my deflection will go to 96% as long as I don't deflect an attack, and it goes to 72% defense if I don't deflect an attack. So there it is, folks. That is the AoE. That is 100% optimized for damage. You should be doing loads and loads of damage AoE. The Warlock is in a really good place right now. So we're going to flip over to the single target. Not very many things change single target. So single target will be very short compared to this in-depth AoE. And then, yeah, we'll wrap up the video. Hopefully you enjoyed AoE. If you have any questions specifically for AoE, go ahead and leave them below. Alrighty, folks, let's go ahead and take a look at Warlock single target. Like I said, there aren't very many differences. The race, obviously, is going to stay the same. There's very minor differences, so let's just go ahead and jump into it. As far as the gear goes, it's going to be your weapon set is what you're going to change out. I currently use the Lionheart because I can maintain my stamina in the single target, so that's up to you. If you have the Celestial weapons, you can use the Celestial weapons. That's completely up to you. The only thing obviously is changing here is now we're going with the Bowthorn for single target. You're not using a Lightning enchantment. And then the 3-piece set is what needs to change. Now, your 3-piece set, again, is going to be circumstantial and depending on what you're doing. If you're doing Infernal Citadel, then you're probably going to go with the Dark Remnant set. If you're doing, Zariel or Tower of the Mad Mage, where you're going to constantly be behind the boss, then you're going to most likely go to the Music Box set. The music box set's very popular right now. You basically, every time you use a daily power, you gain 15% more damage that to enemies that aren't facing you. So, of course, you should be familiar with Tower of the Mad Mage. Hallister, you should always be behind Hallister for the most part. You should also be getting your daily power back fairly quickly. So every time you use a daily, you're just going to do 15% more damage. To my knowledge, this is the highest damage output that we can even have on a 3-piece set. Most other 3-piece sets range between 5%. Actually, they are just usually 5%. So most 3-piece sets are 5%. The music box set, again, it's 15% more damage every time you use a daily. The difference is that 5% damage on most of the other sets always have about 100% uptime. This one is limited, as again, you do have to use a daily power, but now you should be getting a daily back fairly quickly. So the music box set right now, very viable option, and it is, again, circumstantial. You can use the music box set in Infernal Citadel. You just have to make sure that your tank has aggro and you're behind the boss. It's as simple as that. So that's up to you. I just currently have on the Tower set, or the Mad Mage set rather, right? And of course, the Mad Mage set might not be ideal for everyone because you do have to stand still for 3 seconds to gain that bonus damage. So the 3-piece set essentially comes down to personal preference and circumstantial, depending on what you're doing and your play style and, a lot of factors. So that's up to you. Other than that, all the gear is pretty much the same. The boons, again, we already went over Deathly Rage and Bloodlust for single target. I just stay on Bloodlust here. The mounts, nothing changes other than the combat power. You can use a Tunnel Vision or the Giant Toad here. Obviously, it still does a lot of damage, so you want to stay with that. All of everything else stays the same. Companions, there is just one slight difference right here. You're going to take that, excuse me, you're going to take the Intellectual Devourer out, so you are going to lose some combat advantage. You're not going to hit that 90% threshold combat advantage, but the Battery is just too important. It's 11.2% damage versus bosses. So we are still going with the Battery because of the bonus damage. And you're just going to have to sacrifice that 2% combat advantage, which I have a note right here. So for single target, you're not going to hit that 90% hard cap on combat advantage because you're sacrificing 2% combat advantage for the 11% boss damage. The feats, Power of the Nine Hells, Warlock's Curse, Risky Investment, Creeping Death, and Soul Spark. Powers, Hellish Rebuke, which coincides with the Bowthorn, Hand to Blight, Hadar's Grasp, Blades of the Vanquished, Killing Flames, Tyrannical. This should be Brood of Hadar. Dark Prayers should actually be All-Consuming Curse, and this should be Deadly Curse. So it's still abusing, which I guess is working as intended now, folks. I don't know. It's been broken for so long that I guess it's just working as intended, but with Hellish Rebuke, plus All-Consuming Curse, plus Deadly Curse, plus the Bowthorn, it just multi-procs non-stop. You're just sitting there spamming Hellish Rebuke and then casting your rotation in between. But most of your damage comes from Hellish Rebuke, abusing ACC, Deadly Curse, and a Bowthorn enchantment. It's still a thing, apparently. So, and that's about it. So if we jump into the buffs, again, same buffs. That's going to be Awareness, Chocolate, Wildstorm, Superior Flack of Potency, Watermelon Sorbet. There's your stats with buffs, and then once you get in combat, there you go, folks. You're looking at 90% power, 61% accuracy. Your combat advantage is 69%. This doesn't show the procs of the Wild Hunt Rider and the Fire Archon. So again, your combat advantage will get up to 88% single target. Your critical strike and critical severity are both 90%. Your awareness goes down because now you're not using an Intellectual Devourer. Your defense goes down to 40%. One other thing I want to mention, of course, obviously, is this is where most likely, depending, again, circumstantial, how I discussed it earlier. If you're using a Bark Shield here for Tower of the Mad Mage or Zariel, or if you're doing Infernal Citadel or the new Mod 20 Dungeon Vault of Stars, you'll probably go with Negation or Shadowclad, and that's about it. So that should be everything. That should be Warlock AoE and single target. Again, right now, as it sits of me releasing this video, this is going to be most likely temporary. We already know that there's a new helmet coming in Mod 20 that is going to be replacing the Greasto horns. So, yeah, I mean, as more items get released, as new stuff comes out, as we progress, I'll try to keep up with the guides as much as I can. I'm not going to make a new Warlock guide every couple weeks. That's just not going to happen, guys. I'm sorry. There's way too much work that goes into these videos. There's way too much testing, editing, and etc. So, as major changes occur, that's when you can expect an updated guide. But as it sits right now, I'm calling this the Mod 20 Warlock build and guide, and this should do very well in Vault of the Stars, as well as all previous content for that matter. This is, again, all optimized 100% for full DPS, so enjoy it. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, go ahead and leave them below. Please remember to smash that thumbs up button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm. If you made it all the way to the end, leave me a comment with a hashtag WarlocksRock. And yeah, that's all I really got for you guys. Make sure you share the videos with your friends in Discord, etc. And yeah, I'll see you guys real soon.